What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video for the First Descendant today, I'm going to be covering 3 builds or 3 Descendants that I most often use whenever I am doing the Void Vessel. As you know, we'll be stuck in this godless hellscape for the foreseeable future as we are trying to get our swords farmed out and everything. And we might as well make it as easy as possible for ourselves while also kind of like just absolutely demolishing the objective of killing all the enemies as fast as possible. Now, there are dedicated videos to each one of these, which I'll be linking in the description below, which will explain the exact decisions behind all of the mods and everything like that. Because if I was to string all of that together into this video, then of course we'd be looking at like a 55-minute fucking rager. And nobody's got time for that. So please feel free to use those links if you want to see the reason behind it. However, I will touch on obviously all of the building blocks of the build and everything like that. And I think without any further ado, let's go ahead and start off with the first one, which is my boy Lepic over here. Lepic was redone during season 3 and received a plethora of buffs, which basically makes him kind of like a fucking powerhouse in the AoE farming, arena. And that's exactly what this build does. So if we just basically get my mouse over to the right screen, that would be the right thing to do. We look at the build here. This is essentially a tow truck grenade build. Okay, so the idea here being that pretty much what you're doing is you're going through the Void Vessel, you're throwing your traction grenade out whenever you can, and then it will scoop and hoover up all the enemies, and at that point in time you throw some grenades at them. Now the interaction between traction grenade and the grenades is so that basically what will happen is it will actually tow the grenades to the tow effect as well. So instead of the grenades flying all over the place and kind of like just falling down on the ground and exploding, all of them will combine into the middle of where the traction grenade is pulling everything, and everything essentially melts. And that's pretty much what you do. So you just kind of go through the map like this. You kill all the enemies with this way. It deals an insane amount of damage, so not a lot of stuff can survive the first barrage of grenades. If they do, you just give them the second barrage and fucking Bob's your uncle. The only real challenge with this build, and I use the term challenge loosely, I guess, is that when you do get to the boss at the end, the boss cannot be towed. Hence, when you try to hit him with the grenades will kind of like fly all over the place. But don't worry, for that we have a solution as well. You just engage overclock and then you just light him up with overkill, burn him fucking out, and basically that's that. Okay, so going through the build here quickly, as I've mentioned, this is a traction grenade and explosive stacks build. So explosive stacks affects our grenades, gives us more stacks of them, and basically, kind of like is the reason why this build deals so much damage. So that is, of course, a Transcendent mod we want to use. In terms of the other mods that we're doing, we're basically just building as much damage as we can, and we also do want to just dip into some crit as well. So of course, when we are dealing crit, our first 4 mods are chosen for us. So that's skill insight, skill concentration, emergency measures, and frontlines, because all 4 of these mods affect our crit chance. Then from then on, you're just trying to get your cooldown as low as possible, and you also just want your range as big as possible. You want range on the build because you want your traction grenade to pull in as many enemies as possible so that you can pretty much hoover up an entire room. So for that, you can use something like skill expansion and amplification control, which gives you range, and amplification control also gives you a little bit of max shield there. And then as mentioned, you want cooldown, which we can obviously get from something like nimble fingers and MP conversion, which both give us decent skill cooldown. And then last but not least, you can use your focus mods, which both of these will increase your damage profile because we're fire tech and that's the skills that we use. And they also just give you some additional skill cooldown. And that's pretty much the whole package as it is. Our trigger module is death by 1,000 cuts, which does an insane amount of work on this build. So absolutely, this is really good. It's not to say that you can't use something like Power Beyond. Absolutely, feel free to do so. Power Beyond is still damn good as well, but death by 1,000 cuts really just does a shitload of damage. And like I said, it does a decent amount of additional damage after the fact for anything that potentially does survive the grenades. As mentioned, let's quickly talk weapons, right? So with the change to the reactors, maybe I can just quickly move my face over here. With the change to the reactors, we don't have to worry about mounting conditions anymore. So that means we kind of like have a free reign on which weapons we want to use. So Kingsguard Lance is a good option if you want to just put some lances down and shoot some shit with them. Of course, Secret Garden is good for buffing our damage, although it's not really necessary. I will just show off my Kingsguard Lance. build here as well, which is just essentially a brute power Kingsguard Lance build. It's not crit or anything like that. And then of course my secret garden over here is just a stat stick, but you can also build it for damage like this. But the most important thing is just to carry it to get the additional damage from its ultimate module. I will just also quickly highlight the substats as well as the weapon cores, just in case anybody's interested in those. As mentioned, our reactor is burning mechanics because we want fire and tech, and skill, critical, hit damage, and skill cooldown are our best two substats for maximum penetration with those grenades. In terms of our external components, we absolutely use Slayer. Slayer just gives us a decent amount of additional skill power. And then also, it's almost like it's made for Lepic because it interacts, its 4-set bonus interacts with Toad, and that actually gives you MP back and everything like that. So it's a way for you to counteract the additional skill cost that you see with Slayer. So it's really good. In terms of your pieces, you want standard MP build for the pieces. So you want MP recovery, max HP. You want max HP, MP recovery in combat. You want defense, MP recovery modifier, and you want max shield and toxin resistance. In terms of your arc tuning, this is the board that you're looking at over here. So pretty much a standard setup, I think, for just trying to get a little bit of additional critical hit damage. The standouts here, of course, that you do want to pick up the additional skill power here. You want the enhanced skill cooldown over here, and you also want a mutant cell. You can use something like fire cohesion because you are mobbing, so you're going to be getting this buff up a lot. So it's just really, really good. And then last but certainly not least is, of course, our inversion reinforcements, which again, I can just move my face over here. And you can use something like arc circulation tactic, which just gives us even more skill cooldown. You can use selective neurostimulation, which can help us with MP kind of situations. And we can also deploy resonance device, I guess. The duration helps a little bit with the traction grenade lasting a little while longer, as well as the burn effect from your overkill cannon lasting a bit longer. But it's not really what the juice is all about. And that's pretty much it. That's Lepic right there. Of course, use your Husky over here for some additional MP on top of that. And you can use Lepic to absolutely fry the Void Vessel. Next in line is Nell. Now, Nell is a fantastic mobber, so it makes absolute sense that you would take her into the Void Vessel. The additional benefit that Nell has is she's able to transition with exactly the same build from being able to deal massive amounts of AoE damage, mobbing damage, to actually insane pinpoint damage to bosses as well, which is why she's good, because you can do the mobbing quite easily, and then when you get to the boss at the end of the Void Vessel, who happens to be a prick, then of course you can also just blow him away with your abilities. So in essence, basically what you're doing is you're just going around, and you can either, you know, essentially just hit your scan and then shoot with your first ability the entire time. It fires like a fucking railgun and just pretty much blows everything up. It's really, really good. Or you can, you know, put out your big AoE, and which is your second ability, and then you can essentially suck it up with your third ability, which will pull everything together and also crush them. So you have some, as I said, options here for basically what you want to use and how you want to kill with it. It's one of the reasons why she's a little bit more fun to play, because you're not just doing the same fucking thing the whole time. And then, of course, when you get to the boss at the end, you make sure to scan him. You blast him with your first ability until you have the maximum amount of your additional resource at the bottom, your sub-resource. And then you hit him with your fourth and just fucking blast him and blow him away. And that's pretty much it. So Nell is, as I said, really good for this. This is, I would imagine, kind of like even the cookie cutter Nell setup. I kind of like built Nell right when she came out, and I haven't really messed with her all that much. She's pretty much, I mean, with the build itself, she's pretty much perfect in a way. And I mean, this is kind of like, you know, usual for the newer Descendants. They're usually like pretty busty. So we'll absolutely still use it while we can. So you want to be using Shattered Heart as your Transcendent mod. And then once again, you're building for crit, because you want those big juicy crits, whether you are using your AoE, whether you are shooting with your one, or whether you're shooting with your fourth ability. So your first four mods, as usual, are chosen for you. In fact, the setup over here is exactly almost the same setup as we saw for Lepic. with the only difference the focus on non-attribute, right? So you want skill insight, skill concentration, emergency measures and frontlines for crit hit and crit hit damage. You want additional cooldown reduction with nimble fingers as well as MP conversion. You want additional range so that your AoE is nice and big with something like amplification control and skill expansion. And then you also want your 2 focus mods to just give you some additional damage as well as additional cooldown. And of course you are focused on non-attribute and you are focused on tech, because tech is your first ability and tech is your 4th ability, and that's the ones that you really want to deal an insane amount of damage. Yes, your 2nd ability is fusion, but that's okay. It still deals a shitload of damage when you do the gravatic reversal, and like I said, you can just fire a couple of your 1s through there and Bob's your uncle. In terms of your trigger module, once again, Death by 1,000 Cuts does an insane amount of work. Of course, you can use Power Beyond. That's absolutely fine. But Death by 1,000 Cuts, again, for the same reason that we put it on Lepic, is that anything that potentially does survive is going to get a bunch of that shit falling on top of their heads, and it's going to absolutely decimate them. So then if we quickly do this, in terms of your weapon, you want to be using Secret Garden for the additional tech damage that you get from that. You can just run around. You're not going to shoot a single bullet with it. It is a stat stick, so you're just running around with it on your character. For your reactor, you want a materialized mechanics reactor, which is non-attribute tech. That's our power profile. And then skill cooldown and skill critical hit damage, once again, goes all the way for us here. In terms of your external components, you absolutely want to use Enlightened Mage. The 4-set bonus on this is a huge amount of additional non-attribute skill power, so you absolutely want that. That's one of the reasons why she does that much damage. And you again want to have the standard setup for a skill damage descendant, so MP recovery out of combat, max HP, max MP, MP recovery in combat, defense, MP recovery modifier, max shield, shield recovery modifier, something like that. Then in terms of your arc tuning, you are going to be building, once again, kind of like exactly like Lepic. The build variety is off the charts today. And you're going to be making sure to pick up the skill power over here, get yourself some skill cooldown, grab skill critical hit damage, and get yourself non-attribute cohesion for the additional damage that you get there. Whenever you mob enemies, kill them, you'll get this additional nice little damage stack on top of that. For your inversion reinforcements, yes, go arc circulation tactic, go selective nurse stimulation, and go deploy resonance device. Shocker there, same stuff. I do not know why I have this dog on. That is the wrong dog. So we do want to be using Le Husky. He is absolutely the right one to use that. Although, I mean, you don't really have MP problems with this build. This is not, we're not going up against bosses where we have to have large of sustain. So that's not really an issue. But yeah, Husky is obviously your preferred setup for this. And then for our last one is Valby. Valby is super undervalued and slept on. He is really good, especially once again at dealing large amounts of damage to large amounts of enemies. So the kind of idea here is you go in and you just kind of like use your first ability the entire time. Use that shit on cooldown, coat the fucking floor with as much of this water as you can muster, and enemies will just simply melt away. I will, however, say that while she is exceptionally good at dealing just a large amount of damage to the normal enemies and stuff like that, the one part where she is a little bit not great as to the other two that I showed you is in the boss at the end. With the boss at the end, what I do tend to do is I kind of like use the pillars and stuff that are in the arena, and I kind of like just keep them between me and the boss so that he doesn't dive at you the entire time and hit you. And then the benefit that you get from that is you just lay your water out and he has to walk through that as he comes walking around to you to come at you and hit you with his shit. And in doing that, he will take a lot of damage. When he goes into his second phase, it gives you a bit of time to just throw a bunch of your water into the middle of the arena, which will melt the enemies that are fucking chained to him. And then obviously also deal a huge amount of damage to him. But yeah, Valby is just really efficient at doing this. And like I said, she's one of the... You can literally just turn your fucking brain off and play her because you're just throwing out this water shit the whole time, everything like that, and stuff doesn't even make it out of their spawn. They essentially just die as soon as they pop out. Now, the source that makes all of this work is the Waterplay module. This changes your first ability to not be this little hopping bobble thingy, but to actually be this fucking sheet of water that you throw out. This shit is fucking ridiculous because Ines was nerfed because her abilities went through walls and all that stuff. Well, guess what? Waterplay goes through fucking walls, pillars, fucking time itself, whatever you need. So you can throw this out, you can use pillars, you can use walls and stuff like that to cover you, to not take damage from the enemies, and you can essentially just throw this shit out all day long and you got no problem. The size of this is actually quite fucking massive, so that's really, really good as well, and especially when you juice it up. So in terms of like how we build this, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on as much damage as possible and as much range as possible. We want the sheet of water that we throw out to be fucking huge, because what we do have to bear in mind is range affects this in the width as well as the length, so in the girth as well as the length, you know. So you want to be, you know, range is a really important stat for us, is what I'm trying to say. We're not building crit, we're just building raw damage, which means we have more module slots available to us. So we can go with the two amplification mods, so non-attribute amplification and fusion. Our first ability is a non-attribute fusion ability, so that's super important for us to use. So we go non-attribute amp and fusion amp. That gives us both of those, but completely tanks our skill critical hit damage, so just bear that in mind. Then we can also use the two focus mods, so focus on fusion and focus on non-attribute, which gives us both of those two damage profiles as well as some skill cooldown. You want this ability to have the lowest possible cooldown that you can get to. 1.5 seconds is super sweet because it essentially feels like you can just cast it on cooldown the entire time. As soon as you cast it, the thing runs through and you could go again. So you can really just push this out a lot. Anything more than like 2 seconds is not going to feel great. So you absolutely want to crash this cooldown as much as you can. So then you can also use something like MP conversion for your cooldown maintenance, as well as nimble fingers. Of course, that helps a lot. And then in terms of our range, we want to be using expansion over here, and we want to be using amplification control. That leaves us with two other mods that we haven't spoken about yet, and skill duration actually comes in quite handy. The duration by default of how long the water lies on the ground is pretty long, all right, but juicing this up means that you can have multiple amounts of these layers lying on top of each other for longer, which means that your damage is multiplied by the amount that are lying on top of each other, which is just delicious. Non-attribute Syncytium here is also good for us because this just gives us an additional non-attribute skill power donation to our power. In terms of our trigger module, Power Beyond just does a huge amount of work over here, with the added benefit of that Power Beyond has this toe mechanic, right, that you can see here, that basically says that let me see, the amorphous phenomenon briefly inflicts toe on enemies in range and reduces their attack by percentage. And this skill that you're using fucking toes them, which is dope. So yeah, the cooldown itself is fairly lengthy. It's like 10 seconds, so it's not towing like the entire fucking time, but it happens enough that it is really, really awesome and actually is pretty useful. So pretty cool fucking way that Power Beyond works with the skill, because yes, you get this nice big fat 15% increase to your skill power, but then also you get the added benefit of the toe, which is yum yum. In terms of weapons, you absolutely want to go with the Peacemaker. That is because Peacemaker is a good stat stick for her, basically because you're using fusion abilities, you're dealing more damage, non-attribute damage, which is it's just a stat stick, so you don't need to put anything in it at all. You can keep it completely empty. I mean, if you do want to put something in, you could put in Defense Master and Tactical Change, which if you're switching between weapons will give you a little bit of survivability and also give you more defense when you kill enemies. So you could put those two mods in, but that means you can just put that in. You don't have to mod the gun or anything like that. It's just a stat stick. If you wanted to look at my substats and my cores, substats don't really matter. Cores are more important here because you can get some utility out of it with sprint speed and grappling hook charge time increase to kind of like get around the map a little bit faster. In terms of your reactor, you absolutely want materialized mixture, which is non-attribute fusion. That is our damage profile. And then you want skill cooldown and a damage bucket. So non-attribute skill power boost ratio, I think, is the best one. Or you could go fusion skill cooldown, something like that, which would also be okay. In terms of your external component set, yes, Enlightened Mage, same as what we were talking about just now with Nell. Good shit. You absolutely want to use that because of the additional skill power that you get, which is like ginormous. And then you also just want the standard skill power setup. So you want MP recovery out of combat, max HP, max MP recovery in combat, defense, MP recovery modifier, and last but certainly not least, max shield and shield recovery modifier. Then for your arc tuning, this is the setup that you want. So we're not building into skill crit or crit hit damage, which opens up a few of these blocks. Basically, we're not picking up these 4 here, which means we have 4 after we run this path. So after we go down here, we get our skill cost, we get our skill effect range, we get the skill power here, we get the skill cooldown, and we go around here and we get ourselves non-attribute cohesion for the additional skill power bump that comes to that as our mutant cell. You have 4 blocks left where you can pick up some additional skill power here and here, and I don't know, a little bit more HP or something like that. Then we also have the inversion reinforcement. Again, here our skill cooldown here can help us out with just allowing us to push out a bunch of those waves every time the skill cooldown goes off. Selective neurostimulation, again, to help us with MP. You can run into MP problems if you're going fucking ham on this build, so do keep your eye open for some blue bricks and stuff like that. And then shield particle reconfiguration here can help us out with a little bit of more survivability. However, you could also take deploy resonance device, because that additional skill duration will translate into the water being on the ground for longer. Although 4.9% is... I'd rather take the additional survivability in this case, because you are a little bit soft with this build, and the enemies will not die as instantly as they die with the other 2 builds that I show. It's more like a ticking dot effect, so you have to be able to dodge at least some of the shots, otherwise you'll get downed when a bunch of enemy fire comes your way. Then yes, you do want to use them Husky as well, because he's the good popper for any kind of MP related problemos that you might have. That's it. Those are the 3 builds I find myself rotating on when I do the Void Vessel. I do a fuck ton of these runs every day, so doing it with the same Descendant the entire time is pure unadulterated torture. So it does help to just flip the script a little bit, and all 3 of these Descendants are exceptionally good at dealing massive amounts of AoE damage while keeping you relatively safe and not exactly being punished for it. Let me know in the comments down below any other Descendants that you are currently focused on that you'd like me to have a look at. I have a couple of more videos coming out, but I can always bump something up if needed. Otherwise, thank you very much for the support. It's been fantastic. I appreciate everything. Tons more videos to come, as well as videos on other games. Keep an eye on the channel. I appreciate you guys. And as always, fucking cheers.